All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. My name is Kristen O'Hara, and I will be your moderator for tonight's program, Human Impact on Wildlife. Just a reminder, this program is being recorded. If you are on Zoom, that matters. If you are in person, not so much. Oh, really? PEEC is the nonprofit organization that operates the Los Alamos Nature Center. Visit our website, peaknature.org, to learn more about visiting Nature Center and our upcoming programs. Just a few logistics before we get started. This is a hybrid program, so our presenter will be talking via Zoom chat to our in-person audience. Sorry, it says Zoom chat. That's an error. They'll be talking over Zoom. So if you have questions for them and you are on Zoom, please type them into the Zoom chat, which you'll find on the Zoom app menu bar. And I will relay your questions to Bonnie at the end of her presentation. Again, just a reminder, we have an in-person audience and an audience on Zoom. So during the Q&A, we may go silent for a little while. Just bear with us and we will try to repeat the questions that are occurring with the live audience so that our Zoom audience will know what we're talking about. And of course, after this presentation, you will receive a short survey via email. Please take a moment to fill out the survey and let us know what you think. It helps us improve future programs. Okay, and now for a little bit about our presenter. Bonnie Klamm is an ent actinide, sorry, chemist with a passion for wildlife. She's a scientist at the Los Alamos National Laboratory with a PhD in organic chemistry, and in her spare time volunteers at the New Mexico Wildlife Center in the Wildlife Hospital, to be specific. And she's a board member at PEEC. Yay! Bonnie grew up on Whidbey Island off the coast of Washington State, where she fell in love with nature, with the natural world. I'm going to give it over to Bonnie now, and she will start her presentation. Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah? No? Is this a little bit better? All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you all for coming to my talk. I'm going to talk to you today about how humans impact wildlife. This is a very big topic, so I'm going to try to tailor it to what we can do to help specifically in our community. All right, so Kristen gave me a bit of background, but I am a chemist at Lannel, right? My background is not in biology. I'm not a wildlife rehabilitator. I'm just very passionate about animals and wildlife. I do volunteer here at Peak and also at the Wildlife Center, and occasionally I do help with rattlesnake releases in White Rock as well. I thank Kristen for giving me this opportunity to present this information to you all. She's very passionate about education as well and conservation of wildlife. I think just as much, very passionate just as much as I am. And I want to give a big thanks to Laura at the Wildlife Center in Espanola. She is a wildlife rehabilitator and a communication specialist over there. So in the second half of my talk, you'll see a lot of information from the Wildlife Center and a lot of the pictures and information were put together by Laura. So the quick outline of what I'm going to cover today and kind of help you navigate through the slides. First go through the mission, of PEEC and the Wildlife Center, and then I'll dive right into types of human impact that we have. I'm going to highlight just a few, right? This is a very large topic. So I'm going to touch on habitat loss, introducing non-native species, bioaccumulation, feeding wildlife, and light pollution. And then I'll go into the second half where I talk about cases that we've seen at the Wildlife Center. And you'll get to see some very cute pictures of animals. I will have some words up at the top in red, typically for a type of impact, and in blue, the slides with the blue will be how we can help with this impact or minimize it. The purpose, our mission here at Peak and the Wildlife Center, I feel are pretty similar, right? We want to educate the community, educate the public, get you all involved and excited about nature. And I really like what the nature or what the Wildlife Center has to say. We want to connect people because the world with the wildlife is a better world, and I feel the same way. Right. So if you can take what you learned today and help me educate, the friends the family and spread the word, that would be great. All right. So types of human impact we see, there's a lot. This slide was actually very difficult for me to make because all of these topics are very interrelated. They overlap quite a bit. So I did my best to tease them out into some bigger sections, such as habitat loss and disturbance, introducing non-native species, bioaccumulation, hunting and fishing, feeding wildlife, and pollution, whether that is light, sound, or physical pollution, right? And this is not a complete list. And as you see, there's a lot of subtopics in here. And so we'll go over and highlight just a few of these. All right, so habitat loss. If you're not familiar, this is destruction, degradation, or fragmentation of habitat, often due to human activities, including development, agriculture, and urbanization, right? And so the three that we typically see are expansion of residential areas, we see disturbance, and wildfires are actually a very big one as well. So habitat loss with urban expansion, we can see destruction, right? If you're building a structure, you can destroy habitat. Fragmentation, often roads are a big part of fragmentation. So this diagram on the right here is kind of showing how you can split one habitat into two and you get smaller habitats within them. You can have pollution such as runoff water or particles in the air, that type of thing. Invasive species, whether you're planting a nice garden and you think you have some pretty flowers, but they're not native, or just by tracking seeds around that may not be native to that area as well. And overall, just a lower biodiversity with urban expansion, right? You see a lot of nice manicured lawns with low biodiversity. So things we can do, we can have backyard habitat. What I have here is a list from the National Wildlife Federation on how to certify your backyard as a habitat. I've actually been trying to do this with my yard as well. And so the things we can do is we can have native plants. They recommend upwards of 70% native plants. Try to have natural food sources, right? So if it's leaves or seeds or pollens, nuts, that type of thing, right? And these are all natural sources that you can have in your backyard. Water, I know we don't live by the ocean here in New Mexico. We don't have a lot of rivers, but bird baths can be great, right? Ponds, that type of thing. Cover, so we want in our habitat animals to have places to hide. So trees are great for that, whether either alive or dead, they still can be cover, right? Rock piles, shrubs, even stems from flowers can be good places for insects and other ground cover plants. And then you want places to raise young, so places for these animals to feel safe enough to have their young. And they also require you to have a couple sustainable practices, whether that is water conservation, so maybe you have some rain barrels, maybe you have a timer on your sprinkler, or you have some native species in your backyards, that type of thing. Another thing we can do is thinking about cleaning up the yard for springtime or even in the fall, right? As you're raking leaves, you may not realize you are destroying habitat when you're removing that debris from your yard. Little insects such as this carpenter bee here, they like to hide inside the stems of dead plants for the winter, and there are some species that actually hibernate underground as well. So things you can do, create leaf piles, right? I take the leaves in my yard and I use them as mulch around different plants. It is natural mulch, so don't get rid of it. Another big thing is wait until it's warm enough outside until you start cleaning up your yard. Typically, you want to wait until it's above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, nice and warm, for those bugs to start coming out of hibernation in the spring until you start cleaning. Seed heads, dead seed heads, and stems are great for birds as well. And again, leave the soil for those sleeping bees. All right, disturbance is another, I would argue it's a type of habitat loss. We may not think about this one quite a lot. Um, but things such as following an animal too closely, or walking off trail, or maybe baiting an animal with food, using artificial lights, these types of things can all disturb an animal, even if we're not physically interacting with them, right? We can stress them, we can flush them out of from where they are. Something that I talked about a bit in my discussion on how pets harm wildlife or influence, or I guess can impact wildlife. As you're walking your dog down a trail, they leave scents, they make sounds, right? They may be barking that can all disturb wildlife in the area. All right, another topic here is the introduction of non-native species. A lot of times when we think of wildlife, we think of animals. Plants are wildlife too. And so invasive plants can cause a lot of damage to local ecosystems as well. So here are some native, or sorry, examples to our area, such as cheatgrass, the Russian olive, and the elm, right? They're not native to this area, but they are very abundant here. They grow very well. Have a lot of these in my yard. And so it can really decrease the soil or impact soil, right? You can have a lot of erosion. I know cheatgrass is a very big concern when it comes to wildfire. And so another example that rings true to me is, so I'm from the Pacific Northwest, and we just saw some puffins there went on a recent trip, and they were talking about how puffins would burrow into the sides of cliffs, but due to for different farmers bringing in non-native plants, the plants would have shorter root systems, and so there is significant erosion on those cliffs that the puffins were no longer able to make their nests in those cliffs. And so they'd have to rebuild them every year. So I know that's not New Mexico, but yeah, you get to learn a little bit about puffins. So what we can do is, have native species. Bee City is a great resource. We're partnering with them a lot here at PEEC. So they have a great native plant guide. And I know, was it last year, I got a bunch of plants from them to put in my backyard. Right, there's a little survey you take based on the area that you have and the resources you have. And you can put native plants in your yard. PEEC also has a great resource for native plants in the area, and also the Audubon. So this is actually a picture of our backyard. You see different plants here. We actually have these different cages around them because the skunk kept coming by and thought there were delicious grubs underneath. All right, so pets are actually also considered invasive species. Right, if you see a dog running by itself, you usually think someone's lost dog, right? You don't think it's a wild dog. Um, so rats are the number one invasive species caused by humans, next to cats and dogs. So those are the top three. And most people think that just because their pet does not physically harm or catch or kill an animal, they think it's not harming wildlife. But actually, they do a lot of disturbance. They can spread disease, and there may be competition for resources. Cats in particular are very intense hunters. I read this study on several cats in a neighborhood, and they had little tracking collars on them, and you could see in a single, it was like a square mile or so, there was very intense movement in a very specific area, and the kill rate was so high. They're just very intense hunters, right? So for dogs, what we can do to help minimize that contact with wildlife, the first one is training. Train your dog to respond back to you. So if there's a squirrel running by, they may not chase it. Or better yet, if you're on a trail and there's a bear, you don't want that dog running after that bear. So teach them to recall. And so here on the right, I actually took a screenshot of the Los Alamos Dog Obedience Club. Actually, my friend Tabitha here introduced me to this. And they actually have a course on recall, and it starts actually on the 15th. So that's a great resource right here in our community. Engaging in daily play is a big one, right? As pet owners, I hope we're playing with our pets. But engaging in that daily play, it gets the wiggles out, right? They're less likely to chase after some wildlife versus playing ball or fetch with you. Teaching them to walk on a leash with you, especially on trails, is another one. Keeping them in dog-approved areas such as walking paths, right? Not just walking off yonder. And overall, minimizing contact with wildlife the best you can at home. Big one is pet food. So if you can minimize, the amount of pet food you have outside or water, right? That's a big one. You want to be attracting raccoons or skunks or other animals that may be interested in that. So with cats, the big one is try to keep them indoors if possible. I know that's not for everybody. So the next best thing you can do is try to feed them a high protein diet. There was a great paper I read here that studied about 210 cats. They wanted to see the effects of wearing a bell collar, feeding high protein diet, using a puzzle toy, using a bright colored collar when they're outside, and daily play. And we wanted to see what the effects of those were on the kill rate that animal had. And so this figure is a bit busy, but the general gist is just about all of these were effective, right? It was just about all of these methods lowered the total prey that cat caught. But you do see for the puzzle toy, it actually increased, specifically for mammals, how many mammals that cat caught. But the number one winner here, right, is this, let's see if my mouse works. This Tasty Cats high protein diet really shifted these bars over to the left, meaning it would decrease the total number of prey caught. So other things, the daily play, there are cat bibs as well and collars, but I know those don't have the best of luck. I know my parents' cats really hate wearing the collars, so that's a no-go. And again, just minimizing contact with wildlife. Pet food is a big one. If you are really interested to learn more about this, I do have a talk on, I think it's on YouTube, on the effect your pets have on wildlife. I actually did this for a class last year, so feel free to check that out. All right, next topic is bioaccumulation and biomagnification. These are similar concepts. If you're not familiar, the bioaccumulation is the accumulation of a chemical in your system over time, right? It's accumulating faster than your body can excrete it or break it down. Biomagnification is where, say, an animal ingests a little bit of poison from something, say this worm here, and then a bird will come along and eat that worm. Now that bird has that poison inside of it too. But say it eats 5 worms. Now it has 5 times that amount of poison. And then the snake eats that bird, maybe eats a couple birds. And then the bird will eat that snake. So right, it's bioaccumulation over different species. So a example that you may all be familiar with is DDT. This was once used as a pesticide, and it got into the water, and it actually almost caused the extinction of bald eagles. They found that as bald eagles would go to lay on their nests, the eggs that they had laid had extremely thin shells, and so they'd actually break when the eagle would sit on their nest. So luckily, that chemical is banned. So we see many more bald eagles today. These are different ways we can try to minimize bioaccumulation. Pesticides um, are one type of chemical that gets in the environment, right? So instead of using pesticides, we can use natural or organic alternatives. I have tried some of these, some are better than others, right? Neem oil is a good one. We use that at home. Peppermint is actually great for spiders and mosquitoes. Vinegar, I hear is a good one. Garlic, chili, pepper spray, those types of things. Instead of weed killers, the best thing we can do is just regular gardening. I know it sucks. We can also try vinegar. It's a weak acid. It may do the job. And rodent poison. You know, traps, they're not, much better, but at least you're not putting poison out there into the environment. Um, Other things you can do is try to identify the source of why you may have rodents if you're putting rodent poison out, right? Do you have compost out? Do you have garbage out? Is there bird seed? And try to eliminate that. And the other thing is actually having a friendly neighborhood skunk or weasel around. They actually are very good mousers. They go after rats. We have several skunks around our property, and I have never seen a rat. All right, so next one was lead. I found this one quite interesting. Um, Lead ammunition, uh, or from lead ammunition, we get 3,000 tons of lead in the environment annually, just from leftover shot. Um, that's a lot. So alternatives we can use are copper and bismuth. Tungsten's a good one. I know there's lots of different alloys they're using now. I took a quick look at the market, and the prices didn't seem too different, right? But I'm not a hunter, I'm not a shooter. But to give you some kind of idea why these lead bullets are not ideal, is because they, for lack of a better word, kind of spall or break apart on impact. So you see in both of these photos here, there's all these different fragments coming off as this bullet impacts, versus say a non-leaded, this copper bullet here, it just kind of mushrooms. There's no breaking apart. So something that happens when you're out hunting with these lead bullets is that, say you kill an elk, you take your meat, and you may leave some of that animal there, right? Well, a bald eagle may come, or a hawk, or whatever may come and eat part of that carcass, and it may ingest some of this lead. And so, actually, at the Wildlife Center, almost all of our birds of prey have lead poisoning due to this. So, if we can use some non-leaded bullets out there, that would really, really help out the animals. Lead sinkers are also another one. We can use tungsten, tin, steel. I've even seen glass as an alternative. I can't tell you how many sinkers and fishing line I've got tangled up somewhere that my husband's had to help me retrieve. So those definitely get out there. This is just a visual to show you the effects lead can have on the body. It really does affect children more than adults, but it is really hard on the mind in particular. There's a lot of nerve damage that can happen. Also, in New Mexico, non-toxic shot is only required for waterfowl and specific species. I think California is the only state that has banned lead altogether for their shot. But definitely check regulations before going out. And just for giving you a number here, estimated 10 to 20 million animals are killed each year by ingesting lead bullets or fragments. All right, and then the next part of bioaccumulation here I have unsafe disposal of chemicals, whether it's oils, paints, batteries or gas, right? We want to dispose of that properly. So work with your local eco station. We have a great eco station here. I have their schedule for picking up hazardous household waste. So I think tomorrow they're actually taking hazardous household waste. There's also several companies out there that will help you dispose of these chemicals properly. TerraCycle is one of them that I keep getting information about. I've seen them take everything from cigarette butts to batteries to paint to random things you find in your garage. So there are lots of groups out there willing to help you out. All right, the next one's feeding wildlife. I'm sure we're all guilty of this. They're very cute and they love to come by when you have snacks. Right? But feeding wildlife does a number of things that we may not think about. Big one is road strikes. If they're coming into town, if they're going into your neighborhood, or maybe you throw something out the window, they're more inclined to go into the roads where they're more likely to get hit. We may see changes in population. We see this very much so here with the deer, right? Our deer population is uh, crazy. So many deer, and everybody has their bird feeders out. Some people are feeding the deer, so their population has gotten insane. Someone gave a talk here saying that most deer give birth to one fawn typically, but here we have so much resource for the deer that they actually have two fawns. They have twins typically. You can have increased risk of health issues or transfer of disease, right? You hear that a lot about bird feeders, wash your bird feeders, wash your bird feeders, because you can have spread of disease there. You can have increase of small predators, your raccoons, your skunks. Maybe they're not your best friend. I like them, but you may see quite a few of them come in if you're feeding the wildlife. They do get desensitized to humans, right? They're going to get used to you. If you keep putting food out, they're going to know that you're associated with that food. They may have aggression. They may lose their fear from people and get more aggressive, right? Where they want that food. They may lose their ability to forage naturally. There may be habitat damage associated as well, and also legal consequences, depending on the community. Here's a picture I took of a golden-mantled ground squirrel at the Wildlife Center. Um, he's so chubby. Um, I was going out to give him his food for the morning, and normally what the behavior we want to see is that they're hiding, right? We're going to re-release these animals, so they don't want them to get used to us. But he was running all over the cage. He was running up and down, so excited. I opened the door. He was doing circles around me. He was very excited to get his food. So, um, that is not the behavior we want to see. You all might be familiar with Edna the goose, um, or now Ed the goose. A couple of years ago, they got calls regarding the goose, displaying abnormal behavior, took her in. One discovered she was an Ed, and two, they discovered he was very malnourished. A lot of people at the pond like to give the birds bread or maybe some cereal or iceberg lettuce or something like that, but that is all really bad for the birds. The bread in particular it doesn't have a lot of vitamins to it, so it's very filling, but it doesn't give them the necessary vitamins they need to survive. So it leads to malnourishment. With corn and deer, this can lead to different conditions. One is founder, such as this picture here on the right, right? You see that hoof is elongated. That's what's called founder, and it really disrupts the pH in their stomach. Corn is very sweet. The deer really like it, but right, just as you and I might eat a lot of candy, it really hurts our stomach and is not good for us. Pet food and wildlife creates nuisance animals, right? If you were able to go to your favorite restaurant for the rest of your life for free, would you go there more often? Yes. So if you have pet food out or that compost or garbage, you may get nuisance animals because you keep putting it out there. They're going to keep coming back. So making sure that you put those away or keep them locked up tight so you don't get nuisance animals is great. Light pollution is another one. Um, it may disrupt migration patterns of some animals. It can disrupt their wake-sleep habits. Another one I didn't think about when I was making this was loss of insects or pollinators. About 50% of insects are out at night. And if you have lots of lights out, they're going to be attracted to those and potentially killed by that light. And so another thing you can see are behavioral changes. Cougars, for example, they can have fragmented habitats. If there's a lot of light in certain areas, they're going to avoid those. And bats are also less likely to leave their roosts with artificial lights present. And these are just a few examples of different animals I know that we have here in Los Alamos. So things you can do, big one is light what you need. If you don't need that porch light on all night, don't have it on. Use energy efficient bulbs and put them on, on a dimmer if you can. Shielding lights is a great way to help. I think Los Alamos has been pretty good about this, putting those cones over street lights, directing the light downwards. Using a timer when you need that light, especially it's great for holidays. And choosing warm bulbs really helps too. The blue light can really harm wildlife compared to more red or yellow lights. And here are some pictures of the ways we can shield our lights. So right here is with no, can you even see this? Yes, no cover, right? You just get spherical light everywhere. And then as you progress to the best direction downwards. Another thing you can do is use curtains or blinds at night. We have very large windows in our house, so whenever we're watching TV or I'm doing something late at night, just close the window or close the curtain, close the blinds. It gives us more privacy as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about some cases from the Wildlife Center and look at more cute pictures of animals. So some statistics to start off. In 2023, we had about 900 animals, about 140 species. We get a lot of babies, a lot of orphaned animals at the Wildlife Center. That is the majority of our intakes. And we have had, as our top 5 animals, we had the desert cottontail, rock squirrel, the house finch, the crow, and the skunk. And they recorded the top 5 reasons for admitting, the number 1 being cats. The second, very close second, is orphans. So a lot of those babies coming in. 2024 was a very similar year. About the same top 5 animals, right? We have the finch, we have the deer mouse. We actually had a lot of deer mice. The skunk, desert cottontail, and rock squirrel. The top 5 reasons for admission, the numbers are a little bit lower. I'm wondering if there was a lot more reasons for intakes, but still the top 2 are orphaned and being caught by a cat. All right, so we'll talk about orphans. As you saw in the past 2 slides, we had skunks, but in the top 5 animals that we take in for both those years. And this year, again, I think we had about 30 something skunks come in. So watch for mom on the road, right? You see a lot of hit skunks on the road or you smell them. But they are nocturnal. They like being out in the dark. So watch for the skunks on the road. A lot of people capture and relocate skunks, but when doing so, they may not realize they may be creating orphans. So when we do get these skunk intakes, it's usually 4 at a time. They bring in the whole litter. So rather than capturing or relocating, if you do have skunks in your area that you don't want around, there are ways to deter them. You can use motion sensitive lights to come on when they're around to deter them. A big one is having some kind of noise, a human noise, right? They don't want to be around us. So if you have a radio with human voices going, they're going to be less likely to enter that area. Vinegar, I've tried it, hit or miss, and you can use predator urine. So I'm not sure what's out there, but maybe a coyote or a cougar urine to try to deter them. Some more orphans. So here's some birds. We actually had someone bring in a whole uh, chunk of a dead tree that they had just cut down. They didn't realize there were some northern flickers nesting in there. And so they weren't able to get him out. So they just cut up the tree and brought the whole thing in. So we were able to get him out. There were 5 of them in there. Some had some broken bones due to the fall, but they recovered well. And I think they've now been released or about to be released. So remember, dead trees are great habitats for wildlife. If it doesn't need to come down, leave it up. It's a great place for them. Here on the right, we have western bluebirds and spotted towhee. These were brought in from cats. Cat got them. I think these bluebirds here on the left, I think those recovered just fine. But this bluebird, however, he was caught by the cat, so he had several injuries from, he had a broken wing, and maybe some scratches. But the person who found this bluebird decided to try to treat them themselves. And what happened is they didn't realize the wing was broken. They handled them with their own hands, got oils all over their wings, which makes it hard for them to self-regulate their body temperature. And they tried to feed him or feed the bird improperly, and he got aspirated. He had fluid in his lungs. And so unfortunately, this bluebird didn't make it by the time he got into our care. So what we tell people is please do not attempt to care for wildlife at home. Bring them in as soon as possible. They may have more going on than what you may realize, right? That animal may need it may need a specific diet. It may have broken bones. It could have a disease or an infection you may not know. There could be respiratory issues. We also want to keep that animal wild. And so if you don't know the proper handling techniques for that animal, you may get it used to you, and that will be a problem for release. Specifically with crows, they are very smart creatures. And so when we do handle our crows, we're actually in a full ghillie suit because we don't want them to recognize us. Cars are another one. In an interesting way. We actually had some chipmunks. There is a little nest of chipmunks that hitched a ride back from Colorado here under the hood of a car. Um, they were just fine, but right, they were orphaned. And what was tricky about this case is that since they came from Colorado, there are different rules for different states on where you can release that animal. So since they came from Colorado, we could not re-release them here in New Mexico. So check your cars. Yellow-bellied marmot was actually found in Albuquerque. If you know anything about this animal, they don't live there. So we're not sure where he came from, but we did end up catching her. We caught her. And since it was winter and she was still up and about, we had to keep her over winter until she was ready to be re-released. And then we had a coyote who had some spinal injuries, signs of being hit by a car. So that's typically what you think of with cars and wildlife. This coyote's doing just fine. I think he was released. But we do see a lot of spinal injuries and hits by cars, actually to a lot of birds as well. Man-made objects. You see birds hit windows quite a bit. You can put up the little stickers to help. But when you do see a bird hit the window and maybe they're on the ground, they seem like they're okay hopping around, it still might not be okay. It takes a bit to see those effects take place. And so that bird may actually have some brain trauma. And so if you can bring that bird into us, we can help it out and assess. Uh, Barbed wire fence is another one. We see some birds of prey get hung up on these fences. This great horned owl had collided with one, and it ends up tearing ligaments and puncturing their wings. But he's doing great. You see him flying in one of our large enclosures, stretching his wings and getting ready for release. Another thing is garden netting or fencing. Actually, the softer netting that you may think would be better for your garden or for wildlife is actually more harmful, right? They get tangled up in it, they can strangle themselves. So having a more rigid fence is actually better for our snake friends. So ways we can help. This is just a very short list, summarizing some topics we went over today, right? Thinking about bioaccumulation, thinking about deterrence, right? The habitats, leaving the leaves, using non-leaded ammunition and sinkers, encourage your neighbors not to feed the wildlife. Certify your yard as wildlife habitat. It's actually really fun. You can make your wildlife your backyard very pretty, bring in lots of animals. Um, Use window decals to minimize those bird collisions. Plant native species in your garden. Train your pets or keep them inside if you can. Help us educate and volunteer with us, right? That's another big thing you can do. Clean up trash in your area, secure your bins, right? We have the bear carts. Those are great. Just remember to close the lid on them. Um, and then, support your local organization, support PEEC and the New Mexico Wildlife Center. So with that, I want to say thank you for coming to my talk. Thank you for supporting PEEC and the New Mexico Wildlife Center today. I can take questions.
So we do have one online, which is a very good question. The question is, you indicated that feeding the deer in Los Alamos has resulted in our larger deer population. Can you explain that further? How do you know? And I can help you with this too.
How do I know that feeding the deer has resulted in that? So feeding the deer can come in different ways, right? It may be you putting a bird feeder out there or you intentionally feeding the deer, that right, that's one way. You can leave bird seed out. Maybe you have plants out there that the deer especially like to munch on. um, in town we don't have a lot of big predators, so I'm not sure if I'm specifically answering the question, but how do I know that feeding the deer is increasing? Sure, yeah.
Okay, yes. So this is Kristen. I am on a wildlife education committee that was pulled together by the county. And on that committee, what used to be on the committee, we have met in a minute, but we will again. We have representatives from Game and Fish, and Game and Fish have collected data over the last year. Actually, I think it is over 2 years, and they have found that cluster feeding areas in Los Alamos, and this is not proprietary information, or it is proprietary information. It's not like shared with the public, but it was shared with our committee, showed that these high concentration areas both had frequency of animal sickness, where certain deer were there were certain clusters where 5 or 6 deer within that cluster got a contagion, and some of them died. And then on top of that, we have found that the deer population has increased over the last 3 years, definitely, but probably over the last 5. We don't have that information though. So we very much know that within these clusters where we have defined feeding areas, there are more deer, there are more collisions, and there are more disease spreading. And so those are indications that feeding of deer population is not only increasing it, but it's detrimental to the population itself. And I can always give you more questions. You can email me at, or more answers. Email me at kristen@peaknature.org if you want to know more.
Yep. Right, if you don't want an animal in a specific area, you want to deter that. And I'd say deterrence is a type of stress, right? So,
So the comment, sorry, just to tell people online,
oh,
was someone in the audience was saying that they actually stress out their deer that are in the yards, like to try to deter them from being there.
I I would say that's fine, right? I'm a citizen of the public. I say that's fine. Right? There are ways we want to deter animals in certain areas. Right? You don't want a nuisance animal because that can lead to, right, potentially the death of that animal. So deterring them would be a better alternative. Mm. Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Do you, yeah. Do you want to repeat? Yeah.
Okay. Um, so the gist, sorry about I'm still not going to be perfect, but the gist is we just like in in this presentation are telling people that they can be wildlife habitat certified, which is a great thing to do. But the concern is it is indeed attracting wildlife. Um, and we have sometimes things like bird feeders in our yards because we want to have birds in our backyards and all those things. And so how do we both welcome wildlife and also deter them?
It's a tricky one. Yeah, for the bird feeders, my best recommendation would be to keep them inside during the day as well, right? Until you get your bears to stop coming by your house. You're going to create that nuisance animal if you keep leaving that food out for them. For the deers, right, that's tricky. You can put fences up. You can try to plant some other plants that aren't that deer don't like to eat, right? There are a few out there. I know for one they sure. Absolutely. Um, I'm not sure of the best deer deterrents. I know you can try the predator urine. I've heard that works.
Which you can buy off Amazon.
But yeah, I'd try different deterrents for your deer. But as far as the bears go, I would bring in those bird feeders. You can try putting them back out in winter when they're not as active.
Can I just again, I've talked about this a lot. So, again, we have a sort of intensely high population for our area. And really, in an everyday world, if we didn't have excess feeding of animals that was like actual intentional, what we would have in our yards wouldn't be enough to sustain the population. So right now what we're seeing, and we wouldn't have as many bears. So Bonnie mentioned that deer are having more babies. Bears in our population center are also having more babies. So as where bears would maybe have two cubs, now they're having three frequently. So we're seeing like this sort of like unintentional or maybe intentional but good intentioned feeding of animals is actually causing more problems than it would if we just had a crabapple tree in our yards. Yeah, that's I mean I mean this in all respect, but that's wrong. And we can I can give you information from Game and Fish, but there is still plenty of stuff for deer to eat in the forests. Yeah.
Yes.
We have a native garden and a pollinator garden, and this spring they were full of gophers.
Oh.
The gophers killed a lot of the plants. The gophers are wild.
They are. Yeah. Yeah, they don't really. They're underground in their tunnel and they don't come out and they don't have any predators, so they're coming for you. Okay,
And they
that's good. Yes. I don't think that's the case here. I've never heard of that. Yeah. So I don't think so, but I'd have to make sure I read on that.
That last question was, are coyotes predators or considered nuisance animals in New Mexico? So if anyone knows online, let us know.
All right. Awesome. I'm sure I can work something out with Kristen and get that for you.
That question was, will
Great.
will this information be available in printed form? And the answer is maybe. Any other questions? Perfect. Thank you so much. I did have one question, which was about the wildlife center. So Peak gets a lot of calls, and actually, will people will bring in fledgling birds and just a lot of stuff to PEEC. And I just want to make it clear to everyone that is here, we are not a rehabilitation facility, so we can't intake animals and don't have the means to, but often we refer people to the Wildlife Center. And I just want to know a little bit more about the process. So say someone finds a fledgling bird or um, something that they think is orphaned. Okay. What is the process to get them to the care of the Wildlife Center? Do people come to them or people have to bring it to the center itself?
It depends on what the animal it is and what condition it is, right? We've seen everything from, I mean, there's a pelican right there in that picture, to deer, to bald eagles. And so if you feel safe to bring that animal in, certainly bring the animal in. You can call us. I think they're open 9 to 4 every single day. So call them, let them know you're coming, what you have, what you think has happened to that animal, where you found it, and bring it in. If you don't feel comfortable, or if you're like, hey, there's a uh, bobcat that looks like something's wrong with it, let us know and we can try to go get it too. We do have volunteers that go pick up hurt animals, if they're available, but that may not always be the case. So usually if you can bring it in, that's best. Um, and then on the reverse, when it comes to releasing, we do have volunteers that help release them back to that area. So when you do bring in an animal, we'll ask you questions such as where exactly did you find it, so we can re-release it in that same area. Um, what types of injuries did you see, or what do you think happened here, right? Did you see something happen? And then what we ask is, did you try to feed it or did you give it water, right? We want to know if it had issues maybe taking in that food that you tried to give it. So those are types of questions we may ask. And then we'll just take it in. You'll fill out a little form, and if you are curious about the well-being of that animal, we can keep you updated.
Sweet. Thank you. You did great, Bonnie. So round of applause for Bonnie. You did a great job. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I hope you have a lovely night. Just so you know, we have a lot of awesome programs coming up in the fall. So check out our website if you want to know more about that. And yeah, everyone have a good night. Drive safe if you're here. Bye.